Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first session of the Land and Property Inclusivity Track, hosted by Vidya Network India on the Nudge platform. Right. As you know, over the next few days, Chacha 2020 is happening, and Ubudiyar Network India is very happy to host the Land and Property Inclusivity Track. I urge all of you who are listening to sort of look at the programming that's scheduled for you over the next, over today and tomorrow. We've got 5 more interesting sessions across very interesting dimensions of land and property, including land administration, gender, land issues regarding the Northeast, and also some really interesting stories from the ground. Today, we have a very interesting panel before us today. And before I hand over to our moderator, Kshitij, it is my duty to sort of quickly introduce him. Kshitij Batra is the founder and CEO of TEAL. TEAL stands, hello, I'm getting a lot of feedback. This thing. All right. TEAL stands for the Terra Economics and Analytics Lab. He's actually specialized in housing and urban economics through his career. Prior to starting TEAL, he worked as an additional private secretary to the government of India. And before that, he's had a very interesting career across the entire spectrum of public policy with stints in think tanks, at the World Bank, at the MIT JPAL, and also in the private sector. So Kshitij will be moderating this very interesting panel today. And over to you, Kshitij.
Thanks so much, Joseph, for the kind introduction. Ambrish, could I just request you to mute your audio, because I think there's a bit of feedback coming from your. Yeah, thank you. Hi everyone. Hope everyone is keeping safe and sane during these times. So my name is Kshitij. I'm the CEO and co-founder of the Terra Economics and Analytics Lab. We're an early stage technology startup working on improving transparency in the land and property market in India using big data and machine learning. So just wanted to say a big thanks to Media Network, Encore, Joseph and team for putting together this important session on applying technology for mapping land rights, and also for giving us the opportunity to participate. So we have a very exciting panel of speakers representing a very diverse set of organizations that have been really working on the ground pretty closely, mapping land rights, sometimes in very difficult contexts, and can provide a lot of lessons for us to learn from. So the format of this discussion will be that we'll have basically 15 minutes for each speaker to briefly just present and discuss the work that they've been doing. Please direct all your questions to the chat box. We will reserve 15 minutes at the end to take all those questions. So without further ado, I just want to introduce our excellent panel of speakers. So I'll start with Amash. Amash Chaturvedi is the co-founder and director of Transurf Technologies. Transurf is a technology company specializing in developing geospatial tools to improve city operations, urban management. They've been working a lot with spatial data in different capacities, including on the Odisha slum titling program, which used drones to be able to map out different land parcels and give as-is titles to slum households. They've also been working with a lot of different municipal bodies to improve property tax collections using mapping tools with government officials. And we all know that there is a huge acute under-collection of property taxes in municipalities in India. So this is quite a exciting application of geospatial technology for a policy use case. Then we have Mr. Ambrish Mehta, who's the trustee of AJH Vahini. AJH stands for Action Research in Community Health, which is an NGO working to provide primary healthcare and quality education to tribal communities in remote areas of southern Gujarat. So Ambrish has been working on issues relating to land and property rights for the poor Adivasi communities from 1980. A huge amount of experience, and he's been more, and his organization have been more recently been using low-cost GPS devices to survey and plot the land to document how tribals have been cultivating forest land since 2005 to ensure proper enforcement of the Forest Rights Act for tribals. So we look forward to hearing Ambrish's perspective on how to utilize geospatial technologies in such challenging terrain on the ground. I just wanted to also just note that in case Amrish's video might, in case it goes in or out, he'll still be participating via his audio. Last but not least, Mr. Chiranjeev Goa. He's a principal consultant for the analytics part, Foundation for Ecological Security, FES. FES is an NGO working towards ecological conservation through the collective action of local communities. So FES has been working on forest and other natural resources with rural communities on preservation-related activities. Most interesting from the perspective of this panel, they have recently released something known as the India Observatory, which is an open data platform to assist with conservation efforts on the ground. And I have to say, it's an excellent repository of multiple types of geospatial data for different stakeholders to make analytically driven decisions around environmental conservation and sustainability. And I have to commend FES and Chiranjeev and team to see such a proactive set of initiatives to make quality open data available to broadly and accessible and free format. So I think without further ado, let's get started. So Amarsh, from Transserve, if you would just kind of kick us off. Why don't you take 15 minutes to just maybe if you want to give a presentation or just talk about the kind of work we're doing, that you're doing, and then we can move on, go from there. Thanks.
Sure, Kshitij. Thanks for the introduction, and good evening, everyone. I'm really glad to be here at this Charcha 2020 event. So let me just share my screen. Yes, so just a quick introduction and a bit in addition to what Kshitij just mentioned about Transserve. So Transserve is a spatial technology company. We have a geospatial engine that essentially helps government agencies, non-profits, and multilads in effectively collecting data and also using this data in several other applications which can readily solve enterprise-grade business problems. So while we work on most of our projects as nonprofits, as government agencies, and also as donor agencies, we require a lot of data. And what kind of data primarily? It could be baseline surveys required for any applications that involve, say, land administration or groundwater administration, etc. It could be recurring data collection. It could be monitoring data on which is typically collected on regular basis. And thereupon, the organizations typically use this data to derive analytics, to take decisions, and to formulate actionable strategy on how to solve the common and pressing socio-economic problems. Now, most of the current ways and means of doing surveys have been traditional, and most of the non-profits as well as government agencies have typically engaged paper-based surveys, which are quite tiresome and quite lengthy in terms of implementation, taking time, effort involved in data entry, etc. But these kind of surveys cannot be sort of taken off your strategy to work on any common problem. It is basically important to have ground truthing data. It is quite crucial to have your ground truthing data to build a database that could help you solve your problems and for effective planning and implementation. There have been some secondary data sets. There have been data sets like satellite images or drone images, but they can only give you insights only up to a certain extent. Doing away with ground truthing or a field or a household level data collection is probably not possible for most of the common socioeconomic problems that most of the agencies work with. Now, paper-based surveys are, I mean, it's like quite evident that they are time-consuming. compiling data from the field is a huge challenge. And when you work on paper-based surveys, there are no geographic attributes. You don't actually collect location from where you are collecting these data sets. There is no time stamping, so there is no validation on when exactly this data was collected and or where this data was collected. And to store these huge chunks of paper forms is again a challenge. The longevity of the data is a big challenge. Running analytics cannot be, actually it's not possible without data entry. So you can start visualizing or analyzing the data only when you have converted these data sets into soft copy formats. They are certainly not eco-friendly, and to carry out random checks is actually not feasible, and it's very difficult when you are relying on paper-based data surveys. Connectivity in recent times has become quite ubiquitous, and we are seeing that the LTE connectivity and even the 3G connectivity for that matter has penetrated quite a lot. Modern technologies that enable data collection typically work in both online and offline modes. So once these data collection technologies are deployed in the field in order to forego paper-based surveys, as long as you have the forms, you have the apps and the necessary tools ready, you can actually carry out the survey in any part of the country. One of the most important tools that can power your surveys in the field is the smartphone. It is actually quite evident that these mobile computing devices or the smartphones are actually very powerful machines that we have in our hand. These machines have immense data storage and processing capabilities. They have a lot of sensors that can actually help you collect data beyond a simple looking form, and it can actually process a lot of data queues together at once. So if you look at a smartphone, you would wonder that it's just a small device. What it can actually do. So just to give you an insight, the Apollo Saturn vehicle which used a digital computing machine which could process around 12,000 transactions per second, instructions per second, whereas a 2012 era Android phone with 3 gigahertz of processing capability could process almost 12 billion instructions per second. So your smartphone is probably a 1 million times stronger computing machine than the Apollo, than the computer which was used on Apollo mission. So yes, it is very powerful, but how do we leverage this power in the field? So most of the technologies that help you collect voluminous data in the field use mobile apps powered by the sensors and the devices which are present on the smartphones. Smartphones enable not only smart data collection, they also enable high frequency data collection. So you can actually frequently collect data in the field without worrying too much about how you would be managing those traditional old methods of paper-based data collection. So combining the power of smartphones with GIS, with spatial technologies, with capabilities of machine learning, dynamic digital forms, and which are built with smart skip logics and also vernacular inputs is something which is revolutionizing the way data is collected today. Technology integration needs to be such that any user who uses a smartphone for general tasks like say WhatsApp or booking a cab or ordering food can also be able to collect and contribute data, and that's where we are seeing most of the organizations are transitioning now. The idea here is that any smartphone user who can use a smartphone for typical tasks can also be able to collect and contribute in data collection exercises. So non-profits, donor agencies, and the governments typically need a lot of primary data. And these primary data sets, if they are powered with tech-enabled solutions, there is a possibility of large-scale data collection in a time-bound manner. And smart surveys can help you to know your problem statement better. They can help you to identify these problem areas more effectively, and make the life of an agency who's actually dealing with socioeconomic problems very easy. The same platform can actually be used for building dynamic and intelligent forms for socioeconomic surveys, for GIS data collection, market research, and also for taking consumer feedbacks. Smartphone-based data collections have been used recently in mission mode projects for, say, slum mapping, cadastral records, property tax mapping with a very, very high accuracy. So you can actually integrate a smartphone-based data collection system with a third-party sensor, which can help you improve the accuracy of data collection in the field. Let me run you through an example of how we dealt with one of the most pressing problems that the government of Delhi was facing. So government of Delhi actually intended to carry out a huge data collection exercise to help them power up a data-driven policy making framework, and also to enable doorstep delivery of citizen services, which was one of their dream projects, so to say, to help the citizens of Delhi. Now, in order to do that, they needed to collect the baseline information of and all the residents of Delhi. And so we are talking about more than 4 million households and 22 million residents of a state like Delhi. And when you estimate the kind of effort required through a traditional mode of survey, you are talking about almost a 5 crore rupees kind of an investment to carry out a paper-based survey. And the environmental cost is also huge. We are talking about cutting almost an equivalent of 3,000 to 4,000 trees to facilitate this kind of a survey. And obviously, once this survey is carried out on a pen paper mode, the effort required to again carry out data entry and to carry out data quality control would have taken immense amount of voluminous time. So when we enabled a technology-driven solution for data for the government of Delhi, we could actually cut down most of these costs, be it the direct costs of survey, be it the direct costs, the indirect costs to the environment, and also the costs involved in data quality checks, which could be easily automated using machine learning-based quality check or quality assurance systems. So these are tough problems which probably every government agency or every non-profit typically face when it comes to collecting data at a large scale. These kind of tough problems can be addressed through by actually applying a platform approach. So the app essentially that we deployed for Delhi government is a smart data collection system. It enables multiple projects, it enables multiple forms, multiple geometries. So I must stress the fact here that these data collection projects are also powered by geospatial technology. And with every form entry, you are also collecting location. It could be either a point location in the case of socioeconomic survey, or it could be a polygon, which is essentially a land parcel in case you want to survey land parcels in the field. So these surveys, these forms essentially were designed online, and they are DIY kind of forms. You can actually design forms yourself using plug and play widgets. So it's as simple as creating a Google form, but in this case, you are actually pushing all these forms to a mobile device, to a controlled set of users, which you can administrate, and you can actually push these forms to a large number of field crew members. So when these data sets, these forms were used for data collection, this massive exercise actually involved more than 8,000 unemployed youth who were actually onboarded by the government of Delhi. So essentially the idea was that for every ward, they would have someone who was residing in that ward to to carry out these kind of surveys. And the data collection of residents of Delhi, primarily an anonymized data on health, on education, on skill set, on transportation, perception, use of public vehicles, etc. So this is something that they collected, and these were totaling almost around a billion plus attributes or billion plus data points that they were able to collect in a very short span of time. This data set was essentially used for enabling 40 government services which they intended to home deliver to the residents of the city. And in the whole exercise, in this whole process, they could actually save upwards of $1 million of costs in carrying out these survey exercises. In addition to that, these rapid data collection efforts would help them in quickly generating insights and analytics on top of the collected data. So imagine that you are carrying out a survey with 8,000 people across a place like Delhi, and you are collecting data for every enumeration block and every ward. You don't need your entire survey to get over to start visualizing or analyzing that data. You can actually use these data sets right away. As soon as your first ward is complete, as far as the field exercise is concerned, you can actually start drawing visualizations or running analytics on top of that data itself. And since this, by very nature, every data set is a geospatial data set, you get the power of hyperlocal information. Every data point is tagged to a location, so it helps you in visualizing the spatial nature of problems that you would probably want to tackle. The platform essentially that was deployed had multiple features. Some of them were actually on-the-fly data form creation, form building, and dissemination to the field surveyors in real time, and an offline and online mode of data collection. So most of the, if you're working in land domain, you would probably work in rural areas where the connectivity might be limited. So you can actually collect a lot of data in offline mode, and you can sync it later once you are once you have connectivity. You can also collect a lot of media attributes tagged to a particular form entry. So one example of this is property tax survey. Typically, the urban administration collects data on property measurements, on usage, etc. So they collect a lot of photographs, they collect documents, they collect the electricity bill photographs, etc. And all of this could actually be synced later or synced in real time to the server. And once this data is coming to you at a central location as a stream, you can actually do multiple things. You can actually run machine learning based algorithms to derive insights. You can actually use this for prediction. You can use the same database for baseline and monitoring surveys also. So just a quick snapshot of how the platform looks. So you can actually organize these projects, the data collection assignments in the form of different projects, in the form of different forms. You can actually design these forms online using a plug and play mechanism, and you can assign these forms to different users. And once the data starts coming in, you can actually visualize them on a map. You can export them in various formats, and you can actually update or analyze this data. You can also track your field force, so you know that whether the data is actually collected from the field or someone has just filled it sitting in their home. So the essentially, the biggest advantage of such an exercise, which Delhi government also could get, was a quick availability of data set. They could actually run a huge number of analysis to carry out every sort of data-driven exercises that they required for policy making, and these included the likes of planning for chronic illnesses, planning for drinking water, health insurance, a host of different services that they could actually enable for the citizens of the city. Now, one of the questions that typically comes to everyone's mind is, yes, we are collecting this data, but what beyond it? So there are a lot of things that you can do with collected data. You can actually, since this data is coming to you in a more structured format, it is coming to you in a more organized manner, you can actually use this data as a backbone for several enterprise grade applications. So these are some of the case studies that I would quickly want to run through. The first example here is a fecal sludge management system that was deployed in a few cities in Maharashtra. So we partnered with CEPT University on a BMGF funded assignment. So in this project, the baseline data, household data was collected using a similar app-based mechanism. This baseline data was integrated again with a property tax database. So all the property tax payees were then offered a more intelligent and more organized way of requesting desludging of their septic tanks. So most of our country actually does, most of the cities in our country do not have connected sewer. We are talking about 62% of our areas, urban areas, which are not connected to sewer network. So they are dependent on desludging operation. And there is, until recently, there was no organized or systematic approach of dealing with desludging. And using the platform, using the core engine that we had developed and we had deployed, a very intelligent mechanism of desludging operations in cities in Maharashtra was enabled. This involved scheduled desludging, emergency desludging of bulk generators. Citizens could actually request desludging, and an intelligent mechanism in which if a septic tank is desludged today, when would it require the next desludging is something that appears on a geospatial interface on a dashboard, and which the municipality can schedule and the private truck operators can actually work on. So it works on a very automated.
Sorry, could I request you please to just wrap up quickly? We have to also move on to the next speakers. Thanks.
Sure. Thank you. So yeah, so essentially a sample dashboard for you to see how desludging is typically monitored, again using smart data technologies, smart data collection technologies, in which you can actually spot which areas need your attention. A similar exercise was also enabled for Forest Survey of India, and they could actually, going forward, the State of Forest report, which is a once in a 2-year report generated by the Forest Department, would be generated through this platform. So the National Forest Inventory actually runs on a similar platform that has been recently deployed by Forest Survey of India. So yeah, so just to conclude, the applications are immense. It is very sector agnostic. Land administration, yes, it depends heavily on land mapping, and mapping can be rapidly deployed using smart technologies. You can combine drone with field-based data collection technologies to ramp up your resurvey or survey activities, and you can actually generate data sets in a very, very short span of time. Thank you very much, and yes, we'll be taking the questions towards the end.
Yeah, we'll take the question at the end. Thanks so much, Amash. I'm sorry we had to rush through at the end. I would have personally also like to see a lot more in terms of the specific applications. What we'll do is we'll sort of query the, we'll queue the questions till the end. So I'll quickly move on to Mr. Ambarish Mehta. Sir, if you can just present for 15 minutes, we'll try to wrap it up. We'll keep 15 minutes per speaker, and then we can spend 15 minutes at the end taking some questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Kshitij bhai. And I would try to be as brief as possible because I don't have much to say. We are not as hot. We don't have a technology, and as Mr. Joseph said, that we are primarily an activist group working with the tribals to help them get their land rights approved under the Forest Rights Act, the lands which they have been cultivating for many, many years, and to get the rights over these lands. That was our main primary work that we were working since 2008, and we were not into this technology. We did not know anything about GPS. We did not know satellite images we had heard, and we had downloaded some images also from Google Earth and showed them to the villagers whether they can interpret these images. And we were surprised to find that most of the tribals, they could interpret satellite images very, very well. They just needed some few locations, and within 10-15 minutes, they would identify each and every plot in the satellite images. This is this person's plot, this is that person's plots. So that experience we had, but we had no knowledge of GPS and how to map through GPS and then superimpose. As I don't know whether everybody knows, but the main stumbling block in Forest Rights Act implementation is that a person who is claiming land rights has to show that he has been cultivating these lands from 2005 onwards, from before 2000. So from before December 2005, he or she has to show that they are in possession of this land. And how to do this, that was the major problem. Although other evidences were there, physical evidences were there, past applications were there, all these things were there, but claims were not getting approved. And Forest Department had, right from the beginning, a very negative attitude towards this act, that they did not want this act to be implemented. So what's creating stumbling blocks step after step. So in 2010, after we had completed all the work, we had collected enough evidence. In 2010, we came to know that Forest Department approved only 20% of the claims. And for remaining claims, 80%, and this is out of 180,000 claims in Gujarat, only 20% of the claims were approved by Forest Department. These two for partial land. Person is claiming 3 to 4 acres, but they were getting only 1 acre, 1.5 acre. So that type of issues were there. So, and what was to be done for the remaining claims? And the Gujarat Tribal Department of Gujarat government took a stand that for the remaining claims, we would use satellite images. So we start satellite images. And how would you use satellite images? Because how would you find out whose plot is located where and whether it was there in 2005 as a cultivation or not? So all these issues came up, and we heard from the government officers, local district officers, that they were going to use GPS and PDA machines for surveying the lands and then superimposing the results on the satellite images of 2005 and 2008 to find out which land is being cultivated from 2005, so that those lands can be approved. So this was the first time we heard that this is going to happen. So we had no option but to try out this technology, that how it works. So we borrowed a couple of GPS instruments from the same officers from the district office, villagers, and we together learned it. And they learned it very fast, GPS, once how to operate it and carry out the whole parcel land and those things, they could do it very fast. And we took out the results and superimposed those results on Google Earth. And everybody was sort of a very happily surprised that not only they got the map of the whole village where each person's plots, where they are located, area also, and through these historical images of Google Earth, we could see that in 2005 also these lands were cultivated. In 2008 also these were under cultivation, and then at 2010 when we carried out the survey also these. So a series of historical snapshots of these lands, what was its situation in 2005, 2008, and 2010, 2012 that we got. So people become very excited that this can in fact, and we found that 90% of the claims were genuine. All of them were cultivating lands from before 2005. So most of the people said that we must carry on. We must carry a survey all the lands and take out prints of these individual plots and submit them as evidence that we are cultivating lands from 2005 and before. So that is how we started this thing. And very soon, within 3 months, we completed the survey of about 1,500 claims and 3,000 parcels, land parcels, actual land parcels, and submitted the data to the district office that you get this examined by the by the BISEC, which was the institute which was going to do this, prepare this methodology for use of satellite images for verification of land claims. We sent this GPS data to them, and we found that they just simply did not do anything. They did not say which land is to be approved. They did not give any opinion on that. What they did, they acquired satellite images from NRSA 2005 and 2007. Sitting in the office, they superimposed village maps on these images and identified forest lands. And within forest lands, they marked which were lands which were obviously seen to be under cultivation in 2005, and said that these are the common plots. And these maps were then printed on the paper, and these maps were sent to district administration, that you find out whose land fall within these common plots which they had marked as under cultivation in 2005. So that was, these maps were given, and written instructions that after receiving the maps, all claims of that village, if once a map for one village comes to the district authorities, they must settle all the claims of that village within 1 week of receiving the maps. Most of the district administration, they did not know what to do with these maps, because it is very difficult. You know that this is the area which was under cultivation, but whose land falls in that area, nobody knew. No coordinates were there, and only central point of the coordinates were there. They went to the village is taking these maps, nothing happened. But the instruction was that you must settle all the claims within a week. So all claims were rejected. So we had a situation where more than 120,000 claims were rejected within 3 months after receiving these maps from BISEC, claiming that these lands are not seen in the satellite images, and hence we cannot approve this land, and they don't have evidence. Forest Department receipt, documentary evidence of Forest Department fine receipts is not there, and they are not also not seen in the satellite images, so they must be rejected, and we have no option but to reject. That was the claim being made by Gujarat government. Now, since we have started using GPS, and seen that most of the lands are actually approvable, and so we could easily find out. And the way these maps were prepared and the errors were there, and obviously only clearly seen plots was identified, no other plots. So sitting in the office, no field verification, nothing. So we could not only challenge this in the High Court, that how this BISEC has used, they have used this technology in a very faulty way, but this we could do because we had ourselves carried out GPS surveys and carried out a lot of data. We had by then about 20 to 30 villages data with us, which showed, and each map, we had generated maps for each plots, village maps also we had generated, and we had submitted all these maps. So we filed a PIL in Gujarat High Court. Then by 2013, the process went on for quite some time. But in 2013, Gujarat High Court gave a judgment in which it ordered review of all 1,20,000 claims which were rejected. All of them must be reviewed. All evidences must be considered, not only Forest Department evidence and other evidence. So we detailed directions is given, and it directed that satellite images, if to be used, it should be from any other open source, but BISEC maps, which had the BISEC had generated, except, so all other satellite images or all other maps except BISEC should be used. That was the direction of the Gujarat High Court. So that was, so in a way, our effort at using this technology helped us to challenge the way in which this technology was used negatively by the Gujarat government. So that was one thing which and these satellite images are acceptable evidence. So people started doing, although government did not do GPS. So they used this technology of satellite images without doing ground level GPS surveys. So that was the biggest mistake. And that is how it cannot be done. That was what we have been saying. And meanwhile, we were submitting in Narmada district where we are working, 80% of the claimants, more than 10,000 claimants had already carried out the survey, GPS survey. And this was at the ground level. People have been using, we bought about 30, 40 GPS instruments, simple GPS instruments. No, and we were not exposed to the type of technology which Amar has said. So we just use ITRAX GPS machine and paper, writing down the name of the claimant on the paper and then doing the backend work on the computer, generating maps, submitted its maps to the authorities. And by now, up till now, we have already completed survey of more than 25,000 claimants and about 40,000 parcels, land parcels survey has been completed by using this simple technology. Maps are being submitted, and yet, no, despite High Court order, no decisions were being taken even on these maps. While during the review, they were initially not taking any decisions on that. And then we made representations to the Gujarat government, the secretaries, and then they said that we know that you have done proper work, but we need a third party because surveys were carried out by the villagers themselves, Gram Sabhas, village level forest rights committees are there, they are doing the surveys. We superimposed them on the satellite images of 2005 and generated the maps saying everything from where we have bought these images and all these things. And so the secretary and the other things, they then appointed another institution, Forest Department institution, Gir Foundation, to verify, cross-check this GPS data which has been collected by the farmers. They cross-checked it, and so we submitted all the GIS data of all these plots to this Gir Foundation. They started with, and although it's a Forest Department agency, it has found, and they have done a very proper work. They acquired their images, superimposed the data on that, those images that they acquired from NRSN, and they have said that 90% of the claims which the government, which the tribals have made, and that in 99% of the cases, Gram Sabha decision is correct, and 90% of the claims are genuine. The area which is to be approved is also much more than what has been up till now approved by the district committees. So all these claims need to be approved. That is what recommendations Gir Foundation has already given from 2017. From 2017, they have given recommendations for about 10,000 claims that these claims need to be approved, 2017 and 18. Yet, the claims are not yet approved. So technology helps, but finally the decision has to be taken by the district authorities. Only recently, last few months, the district committee of Narmada district, they took the decision that they approved about 2,000 claims based on the recommendation of the Gir Foundation. Now, then we had this lockdown, but now other claims would off. So we are basically hopeful that in Narmada district at least, we would be seeing that this technology would lead to actual approval of claims for most of the tribals. We have carried out this survey for other districts also, Sabarkantha, Baroda, Chota Udepu. So, and as I said, more than 40,000 claims have more than 40,000 parcels and about 25 to 30,000 claimants. These lands have been surveyed, and we would now need to upscale this. And at that time, we would need some other technology which can reduce some of the works, because we have been using no big technology. And we are basically right now partnering with Cadastra also and trying to get this use of survey 1, 2, 3 and collect and all these forms, and maybe we can use that. But that's the story which we wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. That was really fascinating, especially for those of us who are so far removed from the field at different points. So, and thank you also for finishing on time. So last we'll take Chiranjeev. Chiranjeet is the principal consultant from the Foundation for Ecological Security, FES. Chiranjeet, off to you.
Thank you, Sitish. I am audible, right?
Yes.
Okay. So without losing any much time, I'll just jump into the presentation itself. So first of all, good evening to all of the attendees and the panelists here. As Sitish was mentioning about the Foundation for Ecological Security during the introductions time, I will just add one or two more points there before this presentation. That who are we actually in this linking with the India Observatory program that is in the front of your slides. So we at the Foundation for Ecological Security are involved in conserving forest, land and water resources at local levels for improved ecological, social and economic outcomes. We worked on village commons and helped nearly some 20,000 village, reclaiming some 7 million acres of forest and pastures. And in doing so, we are involved in repositioning the metaphorical of the tragedy of commons to promise of commons. So working on issues of forest, land and water, while we are working in the villages, we also identified and understood that we need to have a spatial view of the entire region, like a bird's eye view. As such, resource spread across human boundaries and help strategize preservation of threatened species, conservations of resources like water and biomass, and extractions of resources for human needs. But thanks to technology, now we have the remote sensing imagery there. So what is the challenge there? The challenge is that though we all know that there are vast of data sets, algorithms, tools, every day being thrown by range of the organizations. But actually these tools and technology are actually reaching to the village. That is the first questions that is coming to the entire technological domain. And we try to answer those questions here through the India Observatory program. So India Observatory is actually aims to demystify and present a comprehensive information on different socio-ecological and economic parameter of India and subcontinent on a spatial and temporal platform for informed decision making at the village level on nature conservation, natural resource management, which is finally targeting to the enhancement of the rural livelihood. So this is an action-oriented initiative, and it's a collaborative approach from the data provider to the technology provider to the algorithm builder, or whoever is actually supporting this kind of initiatives. So it is basically to bring together technology, data, analytics, and tools in a single platform, increase the coarseness of the data, that is the granularity, and making it contextualized as a local level information, local level conditions. And then finally, it is taking them to the supplement of the decision making at the local level by the village people. So this is the reasons that why the India Observatory program has been initiated and has been envisaged. The challenges that we faced while we doing this thing is that there are lack of evidence-based development interventions, because as Amars was also mentioning, the primary survey by paper is actually giving some problem. There are so many controlling factors about it. We need the evidence-based development interventions everywhere. Then how to reach the data which is maybe available at different organizations, different departments, but they all are in silos. So how to bring those informations under a single platform so that a social data can actually talk to economic data and then can talk to ecological information. Then only the holistic approach of a better understanding of an area can be done. And you know that village communities as the passive recipients instead of being the center of the decision making, because they don't have the access to data. Even they have the access to data, they don't know how to demystify those sciences and informations there. And for these reasons, we have tried to build up this entire initiative, the India Observatory, through which we are trying to bring all different kind of data sets together in a user-friendly manner so that people can get the results, get the analytics, get the outputs out of it for their better decision making at the field level. So in the rationale of this initiative, you can see the left side part of the slides. There we are actually preparing different tools for natural resource management and livelihood, enhancing the data for wider civic engagement, and then challenging the present system, that is the disrupting of the status quo, to influence the ecosystem that is surrounding us. To do this thing, actually, we are preparing different tools, enhancing the data, and prepared this entire India Observatory program. And right side part is basically the action areas, like pulling development of the tools, the data, enriching the data, then adding the value in that, improve the outreach at the village level, and then building up the digital narrative rather than making it a simple, making it a complex environment. So the initiative in these three directions, we have prepared and we have joined hand with many of our collaborators, many of our partners to bring out different tools. Some of them we have already built up in-house, but some of them also have been taken from the different other partners. So for the tools like CLART, these are the basically acronyms, but you can see at the bottom of the slides the full name of these acronyms, like CLART, GEAT, crop water, CW is the crop water budgeting. These are the different tools for natural resource management. For data access, enhancing the data access, we have the data platform. Data platform is whatever I just said, I'm talking about last few minutes, is that different socioeconomic and ecological data have been clubbed, have been archived, have been managed to be displayed on a GIS-based platform. So I will show the glimpse of that in this after this slide. We have the informations of the biodiversity of 30,000 plus taxes of birds, mammals, reptiles, and the angiosperm, that is the flowering plant flora. We have the block atlases panchayat profile, and then we are using different algorithms, tools, and technology for disrupting the status quo, that is the state of land resources, NDFI analysis, so wasteland atlases. These are the different initiatives that have been envisaged in the have been already put into the India Observatory program. So this is the glimpse of the data platform. I am not going to show you the direct platform from here, but you can actually type the URL https://dp.observatory.org.in. You have to register there by putting your name and your organization's name. And after then you can actually access all the data from this platform itself. So this provides a pan-India level multidisciplinary data, which are mostly open source data, where we can actually get the village level polygon, also from a state, district, block to panchayat to village level polygon, attached with different kind of attribute data from 1950 onwards for many of the locations. And from 1991, all the area like census informations are available across the villages. There are more than 1700 parameters of data of like something like populations to male-female ratio to different kind of informations. More than 1700 data layers are available there. This platform is multilinguistic. So in your local languages, you can actually access this platform also. And we also have different Android apps associated with this platform to get this data, get the digital narrative out of this data sets over there. So just for an example, like you can actually pull out the data for as a block profile, as a panchayat profile, as a village profile. So you have to select your area of interest, like it's a district, it could be a village, it could be a panchayat, and you can get to know that how many villages are there in your particular block, how many populations are there, and so much infographics are already available in this platform. So it is a completely free platform. You have to just log in there and can get all the information. And even if it is required, you can actually take out the information in PDF file also as a download. Then different infographics, indicators, that is also available in different scale. And one of the major or very important feature that is available in this platform is the side-by-side temporal comparisons. That is, you can actually get two screens in the left and right hand, and you can put the same data like the NDFI, like the vegetation index, and you can choose the date also. That is the spatial variation as well as temporal variation. Then the left side, you can see that it is a first February of 2000, how the vegetation is covered in that particular location. And the right side will show you that in 2016, what is the situation. This kind of data is available in every 8 days interval, published by NASA. And we have archived the entire information here. And by using that, you can actually compare one locations with another locations or the same locations with different time period data. So these are the different features, and I will just urge or request you to go through the platform. You don't need any help from our side, because all the information is already available. There's a guided tool. You can take the help of the guided tool and you can actually explore the platform very easily. This is a very user active, interactive platform. You can use it there. And what I was just telling, that by using this data set, we have also prepared some tool like CLART that I will just explain here in 1 or 2 minutes. This is a tool that has been developed for supporting the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Schemes, MGNRGS, that is happening all over the country, where the nearly some 40,000 crore rupees being spent every year from our tax money. But all the plans that have been developed is basically lack of evidence-based planning and implementations. The plan that have been prepared is basically has been done on intuitive knowledge, but the local people are not getting access to the scientific information. And there are very limited staff available in the field, the technical staff from the government side also, so they cannot reach each and every locations there. So this tool is actually helping the people in the village as a rural cadre, or even any semi-literate people who can understand color. They can get the information in a simplified way, and they can use this tool for making a better plant and soil and water conservation kind of activities. So this is you can see the map over here. This different color indicates different interventions. Like if the green color is there in your area, the green color means this is the area for good recharge. If it is yellow, that means this is an area of moderate recharge. If it is red color, means this area is only for surface water storage. And if it is a purple color, that indicates that this is a very high slope area, only plantation kind of activity is possible there. So this map has been prepared on based of nearly some 17 layers from geology, geomorphology, drainage, slope, land use, land cover, etc. So by using these entire informations on a special platform, the only output is coming to the village person as a handy tool in a color coded map. And this is a simple tool that is an Android based tool. You have to just click on this tool. The map will appear without internet connection in the field, and the inbuilt GPS in your mobile device will locate you on which color you are standing, so that you can easily come to know, okay, I'm standing here, I have to go for this particular intervention. It's like surface water storage, or maybe the groundwater recharge or plantation. You can get to know it very easily based on the 17-18 layers, the scientific layers that is already being worked at the back end side. And then once you are there, that okay, I am here as a red color area, then I have to go for some particular interventions like a farm pond. Then you have to just put the length, breadth and weight, and you get to know that how many man-days is required, what is the material cost, what would be the labor cost, unskilled labor cost, skilled labor cost, detailed informations you can generate immediately on the field without internet and without help of an engineer, which you can save on offline. And once you are coming back to an online zone, on an internet zone, you can send everything to the portal. And by accessing portal, you can get to also know that how many people have used your tool, how many people have uploaded the form, and one page document for each and every interventions with a screenshot that you have done at the field. Like I am making these water conservations because this is the location based on the CLART map. Then a series of questions, that which locations, what is the plan that you are doing, and a photograph of that locations can automatically be downloaded from the app portal itself to prepare a detailed project report or any planning document. This tool is available for across 15 states and being used for many of our partners and by FES also. Even the government, different government departments are using this tool, like Odisha, Chhattisgarh, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Maharashtra. Many government departments have signed MOU with FES, and they have started using this tool for preparing detailed project report under MGNRGA program. And in future, we are trying to integrate many other data like NDVI and many other data that is already available to identify the best possible locations or prioritize your area for plantation kind of activity and which species to be planted there. Because every species cannot be planted in every location based on the different biophysical data that is already available in the portal. By using them, we are trying to put the best possible plant at a particular location with help of Wildlife Institute of India, Dehradun. And we have different partners. As I mentioned, this is a collaborative approach. So we have many partners for many kind of activities, even from data to the think tank. And these are the different tools other than the CLART that is available. The green color indicates the tool that is already available in the platform. and blue color is under development, and there are some pink colors which are for conceptual stage. These are basically for natural resource management, livelihood, water, land and forest, or maybe for data access and the knowledge products. And I will urge and request you, all of you, to visit this site, www.indiaobservatory.org.in. From there, you can actually get all the access of the tools and the information related to this India Observatory. Also, in the right-hand side, you can see there's a collaborations COVID Action Support Team, Coast India, where we are actually for last few weeks we are continuously working with the different kind of data set that is available to support the COVID actions. So one side you will get the information what is the available resources and what is the migrant status, and we are trying to link these two things together so that the migrant people can get to know what are the different resources available, how to reach it from one place to another place, and their status. And if an NGO or a real provider want to help them, they can also help these people who are stranded in some location. So I am just binding up here. I'll be happy to provide any kind of insights. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Chiranjeev. This is, I have to say, India Observatory is a real goldmine of a lot of information, a lot of data. For us geospatial geeks in particular, it's, I think, quite exciting. So really commendable job by the team to put out so much information, openly and in the public domain. So I'll quickly just, there's a few questions that are in the group that have already been asked, and some have even been answered. I think a couple of questions for Amash, Transserve. So one question from Shalmuri was about how NGOs and other organizations can use the Transserve platform, and there are social impact use cases. I think Amash, you presented your work with the Delhi government, and also there's a link that has been shared to your online platform. You guys have already answered that question, so we won't go into too much detail on that. Then another one was on, during the pandemic, you can't really go and collect data on the ground. So, what are ways to be able to get information? And that also you've answered by saying that there are ways to maybe crowdsource information through smartphone apps, and drone surveys. I think one more, question that I think for you guys, that would be around the importance of overlaying the importance of open data in general in the delivery of public services. So I think maybe, I would kind of point the question to your previous presentation. And I'm just in the interest of time, I think just trying to go through a lot of these questions now. Okay, so here's one, and I think Amri sir can maybe reflect on this. Richa Joshi asked that there is, so she's working on the Indo-Nepal border on land governance and customary laws, and is finding that there's actually a lot of community-related negotiations in ownerships and right to use that may be different or maybe complementary to the record of rights and cadastral records, the official kind of government record. So the question was about how important is it to strike a balance between the quantitative as well as qualitative data when it comes to these rights. Amri sir, do you want to kind of answer that based on your experiences?
So I did not really get the question. Quite.
I think
qualitative and quantitative.
I think the question was about how do you blend both the quantitative data and the qualitative information, such as a lot of communities or traditional groups will have a lot of informal information about property rights.
Property rights are the biggest issue in our country, I feel, is that our land records do not really reflect the ground level situation. Most of the lands which on government records are government lands or forest lands or other revenue wastelands are being used by people and for many years, and there is no record of those things. So the first thing for all these digital land records and updating the land rights and all these works would not make a headway unless and until there is a very big this mismatch between the records and the actual situation on the ground is corrected first. And that is the biggest issue, I think, which we need. So, and in that, qualitative and physically also, the basic thing is you have to carry out the surveys. You carry out the surveys, determine what is to be which land is being cultivated by which person for how many years, what is his other situation, is this an encroachment or is this a bona fide livelihood need? And then you recognize this. This is the whole thing in tribal areas, especially where we are working. 80% of the families don't have title lands, but they are all agriculturists. They are cultivating lands, and all they are on paper they are all encroachers. So unless and until we decriminalize this whole set of populations who are just speaking out their basic livelihood needs, and the effect of that we have seen in this forest rights. The moment a tribal gets the title over the land, the amount of inputs he puts on the land, he starts land leveling, he would spend his own money, 20,000 rupees, 30,000 rupees, he would dug a borewell, he would level the land, and he has increased. We have so many examples in the villages where we are working that people have invested a lot of money and labor on to improve that land because now they have security. So the productivity of the land goes up. They become, and the most important thing is that they get decriminalized. They are no longer encroachers. They get social respect. So the whole attitude changes and they start taking long-term view of the property. And that is what the property rights is all about. That is what, but traditional knowledge is also there and people have, and so most important, the basic problem I find is that those who are for use of technology, we have forgotten. When the Britishers used to carry out the survey, they would take statements of each and every farmer and and take a history of what has been doing. Right now, we had this resurvey of all these lands going on in all the villages. Not a single person who went to the villages even asked a single question to the villagers, and they completed the whole survey. And we have the mess where the surveys are not matching, ground level situation is different, and survey results are different. So technology without involving people or without taking people into confidence on its own cannot solve the problem. And we are so, in a way, believing that technology is everything and we need not involve people, we need not talk to the people. That approach won't work.
Yes, sir. So point taken. On the other end of the spectrum, we have a very technical question, which is about what resolution of satellite imagery you use to superimpose on the village maps, which are very old.
2.5 meter. NRSA, Cartosat images, and Google even 1 meter.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, great. So there are a few questions about open data application to city services, and I think also in light of this whole the sort of COVID management that has to be done. I think Amarsh, and then after that Chiranjeev, could you guys maybe expand on what you have been, how your platform can be utilized and be helpful for various types of functions that are necessary for epidemiology. So in terms of COVID, or even other applications of public health in terms of urban management.
Sure. So there are a couple of use cases that I would like to share. So the first one is primarily with data collection itself. So we are helping some governments in the country to help organize the data on sort of inventorying the containment areas, containment zones, mapping them in the field, also creating geofences around them so that they can actually create buffer zones around the containment areas in real time. That is one of the core functions or core applications of spatial technology that has been immensely useful in controlling this epidemic. Second area that we have been focusing on is actually pertaining to open data itself. So what we have been doing for the past few weeks is publishing a lot of visual maps, interactive digital maps, which actually any user can also publish using our online platform. You can actually sort of load census data sets, etc., and you can load different data sets pertaining to COVID-19 and visualize the correlation between different factors that could actually help you in effective decision making. For example, one of these visualizations that we created was on the domestic abuse cases during the period of lockdown, and how spatially these cases have been reported across the country, and what is the intensity or the jump in such cases that has been observed, and where the government can actually needs to focus.
Thanks so much. Chiranjeev, what?
Yeah, I mean, I am completely agree with Amar's. Amar's actually answered my question, but it is similarly that kind of situations where different kind of data is required, even with the case of COVID or without the case of COVID. Like if the people are needed the socio-economic and environmental information from a particular region, that he can just log into the portal and can select his area of interest. Just for like example, like if he wants to see the changes in vegetation, or if he want to see the population's density of a particular location, and he wants to compare that, okay, in my village my population density is this, then what is the national average? So he can actually just compare these two things by just zoom in and zoom out of that particular platform. And for the COVID cases, that is another platform is available there, as I mentioned in my presentation also. So people just need to locate the migrant people there, because there are lots of information of the migrant people who are stranded in different part of the country. They are going back to Jharkhand, they are going back to Uttar Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh, and many other states. So how many people are actually going to in different districts? So what kind of health center need to be established there? Like the different schools can be converted into quarantine center, or where the COVID testing facility is available. So people can actually choose the routes from here to there they need to go. Then if they are reaching there, then where are the hospitals, where are the COVID centers, where the schools are available, where the Anganwadi centers are available. They can all get it from that information from there. And if the NGO or the other relief providers, if they want to know that, I'm there to provide the food facility. So where they need to put their stall, or where they need to put the facilities over there, so that the migrant people who are actually moving, maybe by walk, so they can actually reach there and get the food and get the shelter, or even if they need some money for their mobile recharge or something else, they can get it from there. So these are some use cases that we can easily envisage, and based on that, that can be used.
Thanks, Chiranjeev. And really, I checked out your platform very quickly before this in terms of the migrant, the mapping of the facilities and the clusters. I think it's tremendously valuable, and I would really encourage people in the audience to be able to go and check it out. It's a really useful tool. Amash, I had a question actually for you guys. You work a lot with different governments, municipal bodies, and have done a lot of this work, and particularly in the context of technical service providers with government. I mean, what are the set of challenges? We hear a lot about in terms of payments and tendering, and having government be a reliable kind of contractual partner. How have you kind of overcome those challenges, or how important are they in your work?
Yeah, so certainly, working with government is not a cakewalk. I mean, it is quite difficult first to sort of sell the solution and convince them to buy it. But what we have seen of late is that in general, the acceptance of technology-enabled solutions has improved, and it is we are seeing a lot of acceptance in almost all the sectors that we have worked in. What we also do, so I would probably sort of advise this to the startups or civic tech companies who are probably sort of starting up providing their tech solutions to the government, is that they could actually partner with agencies who in general provide technology or system integration solutions to the government, and they can actually sort of provide their value added services on top of it. There are open platforms like Digit, which is from eGov Foundation, so which is open source, and actually contributors can build on top of that platform and sell their solutions atop. So yeah, there are various ways and means of doing it. It's difficult, but yes, it is possible.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. And I think we're running out of time, so we'll do the last question, and this is to Amrish sir. Amy from Cadastra. Amy from Cadastra is asking about how accepting our local and district governments for decentralized technologies to establish land claims, and what can be done to improve their acceptance. And I'd like to also just add another related question to that, is that what are the means to be able to ensure that legitimacy, right? How do you kind of prevent possible misinformation that someone might have purposely kind of put in if you have a decentralized solution, because that also ties into how the state perceives that legitimacy.
That to answering your question first, so by and large, because when you are using this geospatial type of technology, whenever there is this question of legitimacy always comes, because people have this tendency of surveying more land than what they are actually doing sometimes, but very quickly they realize, because there are neighbors. So neighbors would ensure that their land is not encroached upon when the survey work actually goes on. And also on the open lands also, it would satellite image and the past satellite image would clearly show whether this land was cultivated. You are not determining on the basis of the survey which you are doing it. You are actually determining the claim based on the past historical image, which was a few years back, so 10 years back. So what was the situation 10 years back? That is what is going to decide the claim. So that is taken care of, and overlaps and all those things are easily caught because we have plots. So whenever we find there would be instance that one person has already claimed and the same land is parcel is also surveyed by another person after a few months, but immediately these things would be caught. So that is not an issue. Problem of acceptability, it's initially very difficult, although we are using this technology, and we are because from 2017 we have been doing this work from 2012, and by 17, even after verification by the state agency, the reluctance of the district authorities to accept this was very, very low. But that were very high. They were not very proactive to accept it. But slowly, then persons in. We have to work, meet them often, meet the officers often, and over a time, a legitimacy. And once they find that the work which has been done is proper, and there is no. So GEAR Foundation, we were really surprised that they give this such a positive reports. So over a time, after a very hard work, people do start, and now even villagers, those who have been carrying these surveys, they are respected in the offices. They get respect when they visit the office. So it takes time, but it works. I mean, that is the only thing which I can say.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, sir. I think we're out of time now, but just want to thank everyone, for participating and an excellent set of presentation, and really happy to see such amazing work being done. Joseph, do you want to add something?
No, just thanks a lot to all the panelists. Thank you, Kshitij. I think, we've moderated this very well, and it's very interesting to see two things, right? One is we have a really interesting spectrum of potential solutions, whether it's Amritsar's use in the rural tribal areas, Amarsh's use in urban areas, and to be able to do a lot of the work that he's done in Delhi, and FES's work across the spectrum, whether it's on entitlements or vegetation and things like that. So there's a whole set of rich resources available to everyone listening in, whether you're a non-profit NGO working on the ground or a researcher. There's a lot of information and tools available here, and I urge all of you to go to their respective websites and take a look. Thanks again to you.